I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and welcome to episode 12 of the JFK assassination, 60 years later. I'm on vacation this week, but it's a working vacation, so I thought, well, let's see if we can pull together episode 12 of my series here. There's one thing I want to cover before we move forward, and that is with respect to Robert Knutson. You'll recall that under the Knutson mystery, what he was convinced was the photographer for the autopsy, but he was no such thing. John Stringer was the official autopsy photographer. Everybody acknowledges that. And so to this day, we do not know what Knutson was photographing on Friday of the assassination. It's clear that he was convinced and made to be convinced that he was photographing something that he believed was the autopsy, but clearly not. But one of the things I wanted to emphasize that I failed to do when we were discussing the mystery of Robert Knutson is that when he testified before the House Select Committee on Assassinations, one interesting aspect of that testimony was that he was never asked what he did on Friday. I mean, I'm reading this testimony and I'm saying this is a lawyer that's asking him the question. I mean, the question screams out, what were you doing on Friday? And the lawyer never asks him what he did on Friday. He just says, what were you doing on Saturday? And Knutson says, well, I was developing autopsy photographs. And the point I wanted to add here is that he testified during that proceeding that the autopsy photographs that he developed showed prongs in the president's wounds, in Kennedy's wounds. Prongs meaning metal rods that the pathologists were putting in the wounds to see how deep the wound went and what was the trajectory. Well, the official autopsy photographs that are in the official record show no prongs whatsoever. So this is clear evidence of fraud because there's clearly different photographs that are different sets of photographs that are taking place here. You've got the photographs that Knutson sees that involve prongs in the president's body. You've got the official autopsy photographs in the official record that show no prongs whatsoever. And recall that it was after this testimony that Knutson returns home and he tells his wife that there's shenanigans with the photographs. He tells her that they're fraudulent. They falsely depict the condition of the president's body. And he wants his wife to know that in case anything happens to him, he passed away or whatever, and this thing blows up, he wanted her to know, and he wanted his family to know, that he was no part of this fraudulent endeavor that was taking place. So I wanted to clear that up. We still need to examine the whole mystery of how they got the president's body from the shipping casket back into the Dallas casket. Let's review the timeline here. At 6:35 p.m., that's when Sergeant Boyjan's team, the Navy team, goes out and meets that hearse with the men in suits where the shipping casket is. 6:35 p.m. We don't know who those men were. The Pentagon's never told us. The CIA's never told us. All we know is that it was a sinister type thing, men in suits, and that are coming up in the dark with this shipping casket that has President Kennedy's body in it, wrapped in a body bag, encased in a body bag, as compared to the white sheets in which the body had been wrapped in Dallas. They carry the body in at 6:35 p.m. in this cheap kind of shipping casket, very lightweight shipping casket. Then, if we jump forward to 8 p.m., that's when President Kennedy's body is officially brought in, under the official narrative, into the morgue, supposedly for the first and only time. And now it's in the Dallas casket, big, heavy, ornate, funeral-type ceremonial casket, extremely heavy. That was where the honor guard was, where the various members of the armed forces are dressed up in their official uniforms, dress uniforms, and they carry the casket in, extremely heavy. That's at 8 p.m. And then at 8:15 p.m., the autopsy officially begins. So how do they pull this off? How do they get the body from the shipping casket back into the Dallas casket? Well, first of all, let's back up a minute and examine how they took the body out of the Dallas casket in the first place and put it into the shipping casket. We don't really know the answer to that question. 60 years after the assassination, there has never been any direct evidence establishing when they did that. We can speculate, but that's all it is, just reasoned speculation. There's two reasonably good, sound explanations as to when they did this. One possibility is when the casket arrives there at Air Force One after being brought over to from Parkland Hospital to Air Force One, there had to be a lot of chaos there. I mean, people coming up onto Air Force One, and the Kennedy entourage is, coming up on Air Force One and finding the Lyndon Johnson entourage. And Johnson could have returned to Washington in Air Force Two, but he decided no, he's the president now. The two planes were duplicates of each other. And so he could have easily returned on Air Force Two and let the Kennedy entourage stay on Air Force One. But no, he says, I'm the president now, I'm on Air Force One. And so there had to be some chaos there with seating, and they were removing seats to make room for the casket. And remember, Kennedy had ordered the luggage to be transferred from Air Force Two to Air Force One. Well, there was no reason for that at all. It was totally senseless because both planes were going to the same place, Andrews Air Force Base. So there had to be a lot of chaos going on there, and that would have been a perfect time to just quickly open up the ceremonial casket, take the body out, put it in the shipping casket, put it in the cargo hold. Wouldn't have taken just but a few seconds. And even if somebody had seen this, it wouldn't have been that big a deal for them to explain. Because remember, when Roy Kellerman, the Secret Service agent there at Parkland Hospital, sporting a Thompson submachine gun, when he's forcing his way out of this thing, and the team is there brandishing guns and they're screaming and yelling, there's profanity, and people said they were scared to death. And what they were scared of is that there were shootings going to start taking place, because Kellerman is clearly under orders. You get this body out of there at all costs. Do not under any circumstances let Dr. Earl Rose conduct that autopsy. But Texas state law, as you recall, required this. This was a murder case under Texas state law. It wasn't against the law on the federal level to assassinate a president at that time. So Rose had to conduct this autopsy under Texas state homicide law. So it's entirely conceivable that Horn would have reported to the sheriffs there and to the police department what went on, that these people, they may be federal officials, but they're violating the law. And so it would not have been out of the question for a team of deputy sheriffs and Dallas police to be coming in with lights flashing and sirens going to Love Field to say, you relinquish this body immediately. This is state law. And in which case, they could have just said, oh, okay, here's the Dallas casket, and take off with the shipping casket. And, of course, by the time they got the Dallas casket back to Parkland Hospital, they would have opened up and realized they'd been hoodwinked. And so that would have been their explanation if somebody had seen them do this. Say, well, look, we wanted to get this body back to Washington, and we knew they might come up, and that's why we did the switcheroo here. So it would at least have been reasonable under their mindset of wanting to get the body back to Washington, if somebody had seen them do this. Another possibility is during the swearing in. Now remember, the Attorney General, Bobby Kennedy, the president's brother, had told Johnson, you don't need to be sworn in. You're automatically the president. And Johnson said, well, no, I'm going to get sworn in anyway, even though, remember, that he was conjuring up this false image of, oh my God, this might be the first stage in a Soviet Union nuclear attack, which he had to know was a lie, because he wouldn't have been lollygagging if there was even a 1% chance, as I pointed out in an earlier episode. He would have gotten up into the air immediately. And so his actions belie his words, and his actions confirm as a certainty that he knew that there was no possibility of this. And so he gets this federal judge, Sarah Hughes, to come over and swear him in. And then he has everybody move up to witness the swearing in, including Mrs. Kennedy. You see, Jacqueline Kennedy very likely might have been there in the back, staying with her husband's body. But instead, Johnson pressures her, exhorts her. She's got to come up front to witness my swearing in. And, I mean, the mainstream press has always said, "Oh, this is so fantastic! It showed the continuity of government in a democratic system." That's ridiculous. There's no continuity of government here. Jacqueline Kennedy had no position in the government whatsoever. Even when her husband was alive, she was first lady, but that's just an honorific position. That's not a governmental position. And then when her husband dies, she doesn't even have that honorific position. There was absolutely no reason to pressure her to come up and witness this swearing in. Absolutely ridiculous. But that could have been another place when they quickly opened up the body, put it in the shipping casket, and put it in the cargo hold. So, but again, we don't know. Okay, this is just reasoned speculation. What we do know is how they got the body back into the Dallas casket. Again, they bring it in the shipping casket at 6:35 p.m. They are charged with hiding the fact that shots had been fired from the front. That was the mission of these pathologists. Now, we still haven't examined why they were doing this in terms of the overall plot here, the overall assassination idea. And, why would it be necessary to hide shots fired from the front? And this really speaks to the ingenuity of this plot. And when we examine that, you'll see that it was. I mean, and you would expect nothing less. I mean, these were Ivy League graduates in the CIA. I mean, these were brilliant people, and you would expect nothing less than a very, very sophisticated plot, because this is what they specialized in. They specialized in the dark art of assassination and cover-up. And you can see this in the assassination manual that's online. You just Google a study of assassination and you'll see it. As far back as 1952, they've got this manual that they're developing. It obviously evolved over time, but where it makes for eerie reading, where they're teaching agents how to assassinate, but more important, how to assassinate and make it look like it's the CIA has nothing to do with this, like an accident, like throwing somebody off the 10th floor of a hotel, making it look like a suicide. So that was part of their training, is how to make an assassination look like it's accidental or the CIA had nothing to do with it. So that was what they were clearly charged with, hiding shots fired from the front during that hour and a half, almost hour and a half, between 6:35 p.m. and the 8 p.m. in which the body is being brought in, supposedly for the first time. Okay, the only time. Well, here's what happened. There was a man who was in charge of orchestrating getting this body back into the Dallas casket after they did their shenanigans there within that hour and a half. And that man was none other than Roy Kellerman, okay? The Secret Service agent, Roy Kellerman. Now, Kellerman clearly was very busy this day. Recall that he was in the passenger seat of the presidential limousine in which Kennedy was traveling when he got shot. And when the first shot rang out, it was not a fatal wound. It hit Kennedy in the throat here. Kennedy could easily have survived that wound. And it was Kellerman's job as a Secret Service agent to immediately jump over the seat and cover the president with his body. That's what Secret Service agents are charged with. That's what Secret Service agent Clint Hill was trying to do when he ran from the follow-up limousine to get on the back of the presidential limousine. His whole quest was to get to the president and cover his body, give up his life. And he didn't make it. But the way I figured is if you're going to join the Secret Service, you take this vow, you got to live up to this vow. I mean, if you're not going to live up to the vow, then don't join the Secret Service. But once you join the Secret Service, you got to live up to that vow. And that's not what Kellerman did. Kellerman turned around, he looked at President after the first shot, and he sat there like a bump on the log. And we're going to see that things are even a little worse later on when we take a careful examination as to what was going on during the assassination sequence of events. But he just sits there like a bump on the log, and then the second shot rings out, and it misses the limousine entirely. That's the second shot that hit James Teague, the eyewitness. And then the third shot hits Kennedy in the head, and that's when Kellerman finally says to his partner, William Greer, who was driving the limousine, okay, time to go to Parkland. I mean, he could have said time to go to Parkland after the first shot, but instead he just stared at President Kennedy and waited till that third shot. Well, then remember that at Parkland Hospital, after President Kennedy's declared dead, Kellerman's in charge of the team that's charged with the task of getting that body out of Parkland Hospital. That's his job. Remember, he's operating under orders, brandishing guns, Thompson submachine gun, threatening everybody, screaming, yelling, manhandling Dr. Rose, carrying him over to a wall. This is what that team was all about, and forcing their way out of Parkland, getting the casket in the hands of President Johnson, who was clearly waiting for it. He had to be the one who issued those orders. He's removing seats. They're having seats removed from Air Force One. And now Kellerman's over here in Bethesda. See, he goes from Parkland Hospital to Bethesda, and he's charged with the task, after these shenanigans are done on the body, hiding the fact that there's shots fired from the front. He's charged with the task of getting the body back into the Dallas casket so that it can officially be brought in as the first and only time. And this is how he did it. He enlists the support of the two FBI agents, Francis O'Neill and James Sibbert. Now, I've mentioned them before. They were clearly unaware of what they were doing, the role that Kellerman had. And Greer was part of this too. That Greer, the driver of the limousine, it was clearly Kellerman orchestrating this, but he and Greer were doing it together. And what happened is they tell Sibbert and O'Neill, and this is all comes from Sibbert and O'Neill's testimony before the Assassination Records Review Board. This is in the 1990s. When the Warren Commission was investigating, they didn't have Sibbert and O'Neill come and testify before the Warren Commission. And they didn't introduce their report into evidence there at the Warren Commission. They were also not summoned to testify before the House Select Committee in the 70s. And so when the ARRB contacts these guys, and this is all set out in Doug Horne's book, Inside the Assassination Records Review Board, they said, we would love to testify because we've never been asked to testify before. We'd like to give our story here. And so they said that Kellerman enlists their support to go out and retrieve the Dallas casket from the morgue entrance at 7:17. Now, keep in mind that the Dallas casket is put into the Navy gray ambulance there at Andrews Air Force Base. Okay, so that's the car where Mrs. Kennedy gets in, Bobby Kennedy, and it slowly starts making its way over to the Bethesda facility, and it arrives at 5 to 7, 6:55. The body's already down there. It arrived at 6:35 p.m. The Navy gray ambulance is at 6:55 p.m. there at the front. And keep in mind that Colonel Fink's testimony that it's at 8 p.m. that later on that Commander Humes calls Fink and says, come on and I'd like to invite you to participate. And we've already got x-rays of the president's head. Well, it's during that period of time that they're making those x-rays. So what happens is that Navy gray ambulance ultimately makes its way around to the morgue entrance in the back of the building. And Kellerman and Greer enlist the assistance of O'Neill and Sibbert, the two FBI agents, to go over and meet that gray ambulance. And they use what's called a church truck or like a dolly with rollers, because this thing's heavy. I mean, I'm not sure how much it weighs, but maybe, a couple thousand pounds, 3,000 pounds or something. I mean, it's really heavy. There's no way that 4 people are going to be able to carry this thing. So they put it on this roller type device that rolls it into the morgue. And this is at 7:17, according to the Sibbert-O'Neill report, or the O'Neill-Sibbert report. This is the report that was never introduced into evidence at the Warren Commission, and it was just sort of deep-sixed. It was one of those things that they airbrushed out, like it never existed, until the ARRB uncovers it and says, let's examine this kind of thing. It's kind of interesting because under their perspective, this is one of the fascinating parts of this, O'Neill and Sibbert think that they're the ones that are carrying the casket in for the first and only time. Because as soon as they get the Dallas casket in there, which is empty, they don't know it's empty, they're escorted off to another room. So, but as far as they're concerned, they're bringing the Dallas casket in. And that was their perception, that they're the ones that brought the Dallas casket. And they did. They just didn't realize that it was empty. And then after the Dallas casket is brought in at 8 p.m., they're brought back in, and there's the body. So from their perspective, the Dallas casket arrives at 7:17 p.m., and then the autopsy begins at 8:15 p.m. So they didn't account for this big gap here. But what ends up happening, and again, there's no direct evidence of this, but clearly this had to have happened, is that once they get the Dallas casket in there, and Humes and Boswell had finished doing their shenanigans with the body, they put the body back in the Dallas casket. They used the roller device to bring it back to the Dallas casket. And then after that, the Navy Gray ambulance is reunited with the honor guard that had lost it. And then from the honor guard's perspective, they carry the Dallas casket in a second time. And this is at 8 p.m. This is the official narrative. And nobody's the wiser. And O'Neill and Sibbert, they continued believing that they were the ones that brought in the casket, but clearly the casket was empty at that time. But when the big honor guard brings it in with all the military officials in their dress uniforms and so forth, now the body's been reunited with the Dallas casket and wrapped in white sheets. So what they do is they bring the shipping casket in with the president's body in the body bag. They bring it into the morgue. They take the body out of the shipping casket. They do their shenanigans. Then O'Neill and Sibbert and Greer and Kellerman bring in the roller device with the Dallas casket empty. And they put the body back into the Dallas casket, wrap it in sheets first, just so that it would appear the same as it was in Dallas. They put it back in the Dallas casket. They roll the Dallas casket out to the Navy Gray ambulance, and then it's united with the Navy, the honor guard, with all the people in their dress uniforms. They carried in, and in their perception, and this is Lieutenant Byrd in his after-action report, that's the official narrative, that they brought in the Dallas casket. So that's how they did the switcheroo. So we're now ready to shift gears. I mean, I'm tempted to say, remember I told you that you guys are sort of the jury in this thing. You know, I'm like a prosecutor. I've secured an indictment against the national security state, and my indictment says that they orchestrated the assassination of President Kennedy. That's the indictment. And that's what they're being charged with. And so I'm tempted to say, well, you know, I'm ready to rest my case. And I'm sure y'all might be thinking as a jury, well wait a minute, Jacob, you rest your case. What are you talking about? You haven't talked about Lee Harvey Oswald, the Texas School Book Depository, Dealey Plaza. All you've talked about is the autopsy. That's right. It's exactly what I've done. But this is what I've been maintaining for so many years, that this was always their Achilles heel, the autopsy. That once you establish beyond a reasonable doubt that the autopsy was fraudulent, that's it. It's case closed on the assassination, because a fraudulent autopsy necessarily has to be part of the cover-up. There's no other rational explanation. And remember, the scheme for the fraudulent autopsy is launched at the very moment that Kennedy's declared dead. So this had to be pre-planned. This whole thing, you look at it as a sequence. They get the body out of Parkland immediately in order to turn it over to the military, in order for the military to conduct a fraudulent autopsy. They had to be planned in advance. There's no way to sit there and say, oh, well, the moment President Kennedy was declared dead, they decided to cover up the assassination. There's no way. I mean, you know, I'm sure you've heard the theories, oh, the mafia did it, or the Cubans did it, or the Soviets did it, or the Federal Reserve did it because Kennedy was using silver certificates. It's all nonsense, because none of these entities had anything to do with the autopsy. That's the Achilles heel. Once you establish a fraudulent autopsy, it's over. It's case closed, because there is no innocent explanation for a fraudulent autopsy. Once you establish that beyond a reasonable doubt, you have established that the national security state carried out the assassination and orchestrated the assassination. And so I could easily rest my case right now, because what has the government said is, I've presented all this evidence to you. Sergeant Borgen's report, the Galder's funeral home report, establishing this early sneaking of the body, the 2 brain exams. What has been the government's response every single time to every time I've brought up this evidence? Their response is the same as it always has been. Conspiracy theory, Your Honor, conspiracy theory. And you can see the judge saying, well, do you want to cross-examine Sergeant Borgen? Conspiracy theory, Your Honor, conspiracy theory. See, that's all they say. And it's a brilliant propaganda device because, many years ago they said, I think it was in the 70s when the CIA sent out a message to their assets in the mainstream press under Operation Mockingbird, where they had assets in the mainstream press, and they said, okay, people are starting to figure out that this was a national security state operation. The way you counteract this is you smear them with this conspiracy theory thing. And I think it's the most successful propaganda campaign in CIA history because people are terrified to be called a conspiracy theorist. I see it in the libertarian movement. I've seen libertarians say, Jacob, we're not going to go down this road. And now they'll say it to me, well, Jacob's a conspiracy theorist. Yeah, I had a libertarian say that once to me. How do you feel about the Kennedy assassination? And I said, well, there's no question in my mind this was a regime change operation. And she said, you're a conspiracy theorist? And I said, well, I don't really look at it like that, but if you want to use that term, I look at the evidence. And what is the evidence established beyond a reasonable doubt? I think like a lawyer. And she changed the subject immediately. I mean, it was clear that she was terrified. She did not want to talk about this. And that's why, if somebody says, Jacob, you're a conspiracy theorist, and I get this allegation all the time, including in the libertarian movement, because libertarians are just as scared as everybody else of being labeled a conspiracy theorist. And if I'll say, well, they'll say, well, Jacob, you're a conspiracy theorist. And I'll say, well, would you tell me why they sneaked the body in early? And you know what the response is? Jacob, look, I've got an appointment. I got to run. I'm really sorry. I got to run. I can't continue this conversation. Or if I'll say, can you tell me about the 2 brain examinations? How'd that work? Explain it to me. Jacob, my wife's calling me for dinner. I need to go. Because they're terrified at looking at this evidence. Now, they're not terrified to look at other regime change operations like in Chile in 73 or Guatemala in 54 or the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. That didn't really scare them, but it scares them to death that this particular regime change operation may have really taken place, because if they look at the evidence and they get convinced, what do they do with it? I mean, do they admit it publicly to their friends that, yeah, they are convinced of this, which then would mean they're a conspiracy theorist in their mind. And boy, that terrifies the heck out of them. And then there's the other factor, is that a lot of these people believe in the national security state. They love the Pentagon and the CIA and the NSA. They think it's necessary for national security and it's keeping them safe. And what would happen if they became convinced that this national security state actually waged a war against the executive branch of the government? So you got 2 branches of government, just like what happened in Chile in 73. And the national security state defeated the executive branch by leaving Kennedy dead. That's a frightening prospect for them, because what do they do with that? And so you've got this thing of, conspiracy theory. And that's essentially what the government would be saying while I'm introducing all this evidence. They're just looking at the jury and say, conspiracy theory. Well, I figure that I think I've presented enough evidence to convict these people beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't think their response of conspiracy theory is going to be sufficient. And so I'm ready to send the case to the jury. I'm ready to rest my case, except that here at the last minute, the judge turns to the government and says, is this all you want to do, is just allege conspiracy theory? Do you want to deal with the evidence that Hornberger's introduced here? And wait a minute, Your Honor. We have one piece of evidence that we do want to introduce at this late stage. And judge turns to me and says, let him, I don't care. And so they say, we introduced into evidence the Abraham Zapruder film. This is the film of the assassination. And the judge says, well, how does this help your case? And they say, Your Honor, after Kennedy is shot, the film shows, in the head, the film shows the back of his head to be intact, which matches the photograph showing the back of President Kennedy's head to be intact. Therefore, that shows that the photograph isn't fraudulent at all, as Mr. Hornberger has alleged. And that means that all his witnesses Saunders Spencer and Dr. McClellan and Clint Hill and the FBI agents and Nurse Bell and all the other witnesses that established that massive hole in the back of his head have been giving false testimony. Because now the government has the official autopsy photograph showing the back of Kennedy's head to be intact, and they got a film that shows the back of President Kennedy's head to be intact after the shot that hit him in the head. Whoa. So now the government has thrown a real fly in the ointment here. You know, you as the jury might be thinking, well, this might be reasonable doubt after all. Maybe the government's innocent after all. What's Mr. Hornberger going to do with this evidence? Well, that's where we're going to shift gears, and we're going to examine that particular evidence in the next episode. I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and this is episode 12 of the JFK assassination 60 years later.